check. There it is. All right, welcome everyone. We'll start here in a couple of minutes, but I just want to let everybody know we have a couple of classes meeting together because with the Thanksgiving feast going on tonight, they've commandeered the fellowship hall. And so if you want to participate in the silent auction, I would do so. I'm going to wait until everybody leaves this morning and then go back and outbid everyone. But $17? I'm doing $17 and a nickel. Take that. Do you know, last year someone outbid me on something, and then they were really gracious. I don't know if they felt guilty or whatever. They brought it to me the next day. And they gave it to me and Kim the next day, which I gladly ate it. I mean, I was totally down with it. All right. And there is the famous Krista Wolf. Yeah. He serves the same thing as a deacon every single time. Bread and juice every time. It's so predictable, Chris. You got to vary your menu more. I know. One of the most exciting things I do as pastor is to go buy the communion bread because you get to go over to Mardell's, and my retirement plan is to be a bread tasting test taker at the Mardell's, where you can come in and try the various breads out, I'll be at the back like a Sam's Club type person, when you come in, they can try different things. I want to do that at Mardell's with the breads, Like here we have the oven roasted, which is what we did today, the oven roasted one, that whole thing. And so this is my future retirement plan, is to be a bread taster, the test tasting person at Mardell's for bread for communion. I hear there's a big market for it, and I'm going to demand high salary for this. High salary. Yeah, it's the Lord's Supper. Should demand big money for that test tasting. All right, so we'll start here in a couple of minutes, but I just want to know, there's a couple of classes meeting in here, and welcome to you guys, and we'll get started here in a minute. And the reason we start in a minute is that we're on Facebook Live, so we have to adjust accordingly. But it's good to see everybody. And so tonight, I don't know if you know this, but we're in here tonight. There's some hints about this all around you that we're in here tonight. And so we're going to meet here tonight, 5 o'clock. We have a time of worship, a time of dinner, and a time we're going to spend a little bit of time with Caleb online. I messaged him this morning. I wonder if he sent me back. I will be ready. That's what he said. Hey Siri, what time is it in Myanmar at 6 p.m. Dallas Fort Worth? It's 6:30, isn't it? Yeah, that. Yes.
Did you tell them about the customer survey afterward about the bread that you sold?
I meant to do that because if we're going to go the full test tasting route, we do need some customer survey response back for the quality of the grape juice and the bread, just to make sure. So I did, by the way, we used to get complaints about the quality of the bread for Lord's Supper. They're like, can't we get something better? So I found this company that makes these oven roasted, I don't know, it sounds like they're making rotisserie chicken, honestly, but it's wood-fired, oven-roasted something, and that's the stuff I've been buying lately. And if you're really into matzah-type bread, you can buy a box of 500 for $10. And so, Right, I thought that's what happened, daylight savings time. So it's 6:30, which is better for him. 6:30 instead of 5:30 is better for him. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I thought that's what it was because I am teaching from 6:30 to 8:30 a.m. every Wednesday morning with their group. And that's 7 to 9 for them. Yeah, and originally he asked me if they could do, he wanted to do 5 to 7. And I was like, 4:30 to 6:30 a.m. No, I'm not doing that. And this last week, I forgot to bring my laptop home, so at 5 a.m., I had to get up Wednesday morning, come down here and do the lecture from here again. The week before, I did it in my living room. I asked my wife, I was like, are you sure? Because 6:30 Wednesday morning, she's like, I'd prefer that. And then afterwards, I make her breakfast in bed and that kind of thing, which I do every day, but except for Sundays. But I forgot my laptop, so I told her, sorry about that. And so I did the lecture here. But last week's was on creation, the image of God, the nature of marriage, the things like that. This next week is the proto-evangelium, meaning the gospel in Genesis 3, the prototype of the gospel in Genesis 3. So we're going to talk about the gospel throughout the rest of the Bible and how the Genesis 3 account. So that's next week's lecture. Yeah, so I've been working through these lectures with the students, and I don't know. I'm just making it up as I go. So yeah, I've never taught Old Testament theology, and so it's my first time to teach it, and it's supposed to be at the graduate level. So I'm supposed to be using, graduate level discussion lecture notes, and so it takes a little bit to pull it together. Not bad, but it takes a little bit of effort. All right, well, I hope you are doing well. Welcome to the class. And every Sunday we set up these tables, and then we set it back up for the service. So this is new to you, but for us, we're around these tables every Sunday. You just didn't know we break them down and set them back up every week. Yeah. What's that? Yeah, well, it's if you're suggesting upgrading the pastor's qualities, I agree with you, sir. I'm not going to debate that at all. We definitely should do that. All right, well, the way we do this is we read the text, then we pray, and then we have a discussion about it. And for those of you who are not normally in the class, you've dropped into the very easy book of the Bible known as the book of Isaiah. So it's simple, a very simple book. It is the longest book of the Bible and one of the deepest theological books of the Bible. And so because of that, you've dropped right into the middle of, someone just dropped you in the ocean. But we're fine. This group of our regulars will catch us all up if we get caught on anything. And so we'll be fine. All right, so we'll read and then we'll have a discussion on this. So this is Isaiah. We're in chapter 32. And it is the perfect chapter for today and the hopeful, joyful Thanksgiving message that is part of our services and part of our week, because it's a very hopeful text. It's a very happy text, very hopeful. And it's a messianic text as well. Behold, a king will reign righteously, and princes will rule justly. Each will be like a refuge from the wind and a shelter from the storm, like streams of water in dry country, like the shade of a huge rock in a parched land. Then the eyes of those who see will not be blinded, and the ears of those who hear will listen. The mind of the hasty will discern the truth, and the tongue of the stammerers will hasten to speak clearly. No longer will the fool be called noble, or the rogue be spoken of as generous. For the fool speaks nonsense, and his heart inclines toward wickedness, to practice ungodliness, and to speak error against the Lord, to keep the hungry person unsatisfied, and to withhold drink from the thirsty. As for a rogue, his weapons are evil. He devises wicked schemes to destroy the afflicted with slander, even though the needy one speaks what is right. But the noble man devises noble plans, and by noble plans he stands. Rise up, you women. So here's right in the middle of this text, there's a 5 or 6 verses on the women of Jerusalem in the midst of this. So here we went from the noblemen and things like that now to the women. Rise up, you women who are at ease, and hear my voice. Give ear to my word, you complacent daughters. So now they're going to challenge the complacent daughters. Within a year or a few days, you will be troubled, O complacent daughters. For the vintage is ended, and the fruit gathering will not come. Tremble, you women who are at ease. Be troubled, you complacent daughters. Strip, undress, and put on sackcloth for your waist. Beat your breasts for the pleasant fields, for the fruitful vine, for the land of my people in which thorns and briars shall come up, yea, for all the joyful houses and for the jubilant city, because the palace has been abandoned and the populated city forsaken. Hill and watchtower have become caves forever, a delight for wild donkeys and a pasture for flocks, until the Spirit is poured out upon us from on high. So he indicts these people that are called noblemen who are practicing evil. He indicts these individuals who are rogue or seemingly rebellious individuals. And then he indicts the women for the same kind of behavior. And then from that, though, the counter to this is, again, a theme that we're very familiar with in New Testament language, which is, until the Spirit is poured out upon us from on high, and the wilderness becomes a fertile field, and the fertile field is considered as a forest, then justice will dwell in the wilderness, and righteousness will abide in the fertile field. And the work of righteousness will be peace, and the service of righteousness, quietness and confidence forever. Then my people will live in a peaceful habitation, and in secure dwellings, and in undisturbed resting places. And it will hail when the forest comes down, and the city will be utterly laid low. How blessed will you be, you who sow beside all waters, who let out freely the oxen and the donkey. All right, so that's our text, Isaiah 32. And so we're going to pray together, and we'll talk about some of the themes here present here in Isaiah 32. All right, let's pray together. Lord, thank you for this opportunity to praise and worship, and also to look at the Scripture. I pray you would open our hearts and minds, our eyes, to see what is good and right in your word. Give us also words of caution, and that we might also be protected and guarded against our own deception, our own hearts of sin. And we pray these things in the name of Christ. Amen. All right, so Isaiah 32, like much of the book of Isaiah, it cycles through from very hopeful messages to very sad messages, back to hopeful messages, back to sad messages. And you're plunged right in the middle of them at times. Hard to know which direction you're turning. This Isaiah 32 is no exception. The opening of it is a very strong and encouraging text about the coming righteous king. But then we're told why it's necessary, because we find out about some rogue or some ignoble individuals within Israel. We find out these ladies who are also not contributing to what is good and right. And so we find the need for the righteous king comes from the environment that Israel finds itself in. And then it finishes again with a more hopeful message that because of the coming of the Holy Spirit, that which is bad and unfertile and destructive will one day again spring to life. And so you have this cycling throughout the book of Isaiah, and even within chapters themselves. We've seen this entire study. We're now about 36 weeks into it, I think. Almost, when did we start in January? I forgot when we finished Revelation, but we've been at it for 8, 9, 10 months now. And so we've done a chapter a week, except for chapter 1, 6, and 9, where we probably spent a few weeks on them. But so we've seen this throughout the book of Isaiah, and at times you'll have these really hopeful chapters, Isaiah 9, Isaiah 11, but they'll be set beside sometimes some very sad chapters where you go, oh man, that's terrible. And so Isaiah 32 follows this particular pattern. Now, Isaiah 30 and 31 are both relatively sad chapters. They deal with what we would call some tough themes of the coming destruction of Jerusalem. And we say this often in our Isaiah study, that there are some chapters that you do not want to include the verse from our study in the birthday card you're sending a loved one. You'll be like, thinking of you today, Isaiah 37, and you're like, oh, the Lord is going to destroy everything in your life. So you have to be careful about, using Isaiah as verse references. You want to pick carefully. Some of the chapters in Isaiah, you're like, I was reading through the Bible today. I was in Isaiah 24 about the destruction of Babylon, and I thought of you today, on your birthday. So those arrogant ones will be pulled down. I was thinking of you today, So you have to be careful in Isaiah because it really does have some verses that are sad and confrontational and lots of judgment from the Lord. But Isaiah also has some that are quite hopeful. By the way, there are books of the Old Testament in the prophetic area that have no chapters or almost no chapters that you would want to send on a birthday card. There are some books of the Old Testament that are almost entirely sad. The book of Lamentations has chapter 3 is hopeful, but the rest of it's really sad. The book of Jeremiah is mostly sad. The book of Ezekiel is mostly sad. Things like that. They're a really challenging text. Isaiah is nice in that it's a nice balance between judgment, trouble, difficulties, and a layer of abiding hope throughout the whole thing. And so, yeah. And if you're new to the book of Isaiah, there are 66 chapters in Isaiah that are oftentimes in commentary separated between the first 39 chapters and the last 27 chapters as an almost perfect parallel to the Bible of the 39 books of the Old Testament and the 27 books of the New Testament. And there's this very beautiful pattern. In addition to that, the first 39 chapters of Isaiah, though there are moments of hope, just like the Old Testament has some beautiful moments of hope and encouragement, Moses, Abraham, David, and so forth, they are also filled with lots of things of disappointment, where you have kings like Manasseh or individuals like that. And so, I'm going to pick on him only. There's plenty of other examples. Ahab, things like that. But in the New Testament, you find in the book of Isaiah, the New Testament is mostly hopeful, is it not? I mean, the opening phrase is very hopeful, and the ending phrase of the New Testament is quite hopeful. And everything in between, there's some things of judgment and condemnation and some warnings, but there's lots of hopeful in the New Testament. Well, the book of Isaiah is much like this. Isaiah 40 through 66, those 27 chapters, are incredibly hopeful. They open up with a very hopeful message, much like Matthew chapter 1, talking about the messianic promised king. Jesus has now been come into the world. Isaiah 40 verse 1 says, "Comfort, O comfort my people, speak kindly to Jerusalem." So there's this very hopeful thing to it. So Isaiah, in many ways, mimics the entire Bible. And I did try this once. I tried to match Isaiah 1 with Genesis, and Isaiah 2 with Exodus, and Isaiah 3 with Leviticus and so forth. It didn't work. I tried it, though. I was like, man, maybe it goes that far. Isaiah 40 with Matthew, that was working for me, actually. That one was working for me. But Isaiah 66 in Revelation actually works too. But I did find some random chapters in Isaiah did not fit well with the Psalms or something. So, yeah. And it should be noted that when Isaiah wrote it and when the Old Testament was formally canonized, that the Jewish Bible does not have 39 books in the Old Testament. Because in the Old Testament, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel is a single book. But the Jewish reading attention span's longer than an American, so we split it into 3 books. And 1st and 2nd Kings is one book in the Hebrew text, same with Chronicles and so forth and so on. And so there's some combining of books, the same material, but the combining of books. And Americans were like, can you break those into some smaller quantities? That looks I need my book. And if you wouldn't mind putting some color pictures in here too. And someone's like, Children's Bible coming up. Yeah. And you and I are both like, man, I miss those days. There were color pictures in here, and it helped. It kind of helped with the reading. My point is the 39 chapters of Isaiah wouldn't match up with the Jewish scriptures anyway, because there's not 39 books in the Jewish Old Testament. But same material, they just smash them together. All right, so the book of Isaiah, we have, though, throughout Isaiah, one of the prominent themes is that in the midst of the failing of leadership for the nation of Israel, there is this promise, acknowledgement of the need and the promise of a coming Messiah who will do what the current leaders aren't doing. And that happens throughout the book of Isaiah. Isaiah, the first 5 chapters, functions almost as an overview of the entire book. If you know Isaiah very well, Isaiah 6 is the formal calling of Isaiah. Most prophets, when they have their calling, put it chapter 1, verse 1, or at least in the first chapter, like Jeremiah does or Ezekiel does. But in the case of Isaiah, he's 6 chapters in before we get the calling of Isaiah. And it does make you wonder whether he was prophesying without a license for the first 5 chapters, because there's no formal calling till then. Other people have said that maybe Isaiah wrote 5 summary chapters about the whole book, and then said, now here's the details, and then now chronologically we do have the calling first. And that these first 5 chapters where Isaiah went back and said, let me give you a big overview of this thing. That's a possibility as well. But throughout, there's this hope of a promised Messiah. We see this in Isaiah chapter, well, really, even early on. But Isaiah chapter 7, a virgin will conceive, and we call him Emmanuel. Isaiah 9, for unto us a child is born, a son is given, and the government rests on his shoulders, to be called Wonderful Counselor, Prince of Peace, Mighty God, Father of the Everlasting. Isaiah 11, the stem of the root of Jesse will spring forth, and the promised hope of Messianic King there. And now we have another one of those examples that in the midst of prophetic judgment is this brief statement about this undercurrent of a promised messianic figure. And this will again show up, by the way, in Isaiah 40. We'll see it again in Isaiah 61, a text Jesus himself reads from in the synagogue in Nazareth. And so this theme of a messianic king is throughout. So here we have this righteous king. Behold, the word behold, oftentimes Isaiah will use this at a moment of future revelation. Behold my servant, Isaiah 52:12, where he begins the introduction to the suffering servant text. Behold my servant. He will be marred more than any other person. And then chapter 53:1, who has believed our report, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, like a root out of parched ground. He had no stately form or majesty that we should be attracted to him, or that we'd be drawn to him, right? He was pierced through for our transgressions, wounded for our iniquities, crushed for our iniquities. So that whole text of Isaiah 53 is introduced by, behold my servant. And so this word behold, as Isaiah uses it oftentimes in his book as something's coming, look up. Where you are right now, look up, because something's coming to alter the situation or environment you're in right now. I think we see that here. Behold, a king will reign righteously, and princes will rule justly. Now, interestingly enough, the New American Standard, who is obsessed with capitalizing any noun, not any noun, that's the Germans. You know this, right? In German, every noun is capitalized. And if you're a student of German, it is tremendously helpful, because I had a hard time telling the difference between a verb, an adjective, and a noun. But in German, it's like, how about the one with the capital letter? I bet it's the noun. So it does help that they capitalize all the nouns. After that, the German language is ridiculously difficult, so stay away from it. But it will increase your prayer life if you try to study it, interestingly enough, New American Standard does not capitalize the king here. Now, here's what's happened, is that within the context, some people have debated, is this a prediction of coming of Hezekiah? And Hezekiah does make a showing here not too long from now. You might remember that Hezekiah shows up in Isaiah chapter 37, 38, 39, where King Hezekiah comes, shows up on the scene, and he finally brings a righteousness back to the ruling of the nation of Judah. He resets back to the time of Uzziah and Jehoshaphat and people like that. He goes back to those days. There's a law in that. There's a bad series of kings here in the southern kingdom, which is uncommon. That was more a northern kingdom feature. The northern kingdom had no good kings. Southern kingdom would have these really good kings, Jehoshaphat and Uzziah. They weren't perfect, but they were pretty good dudes. They led like King David. But after Uzziah dies, I think Isaiah knew Uzziah's kid, and Isaiah panicked. And he runs out of the temple and like, Lord, have you met King Uzziah's kids? Because I have. And that's why he's at the temple praying in Isaiah 6. That's why it says, in the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up, and the trail of his robe filling the temple. Isaiah, why are you at the temple? Because I know Uzziah's kids, and they're idiots, and they're going to get us all killed. And sure enough, they show it. We see it in Isaiah 7, where the king has now cut a deal to try to finagle with Assyria to protect them in the Syro-Ephraim war, which means he worships the idolatrous deity of the Assyrians in order to pull this deal off, and sets up Assyrian idolatrous worship in the temple in Jerusalem. So we go from the 52-year reign of Uzziah, who's a pretty good king, and made a mistake, yes? Made one mistake that's pretty prominent. What was his mistake? You remember? Remember Uzziah's big mistake? Yeah, he goes in the temple. He's like, I'm priest for a day. And the priest is like, you never let me be king for a day. What are we doing? So priest for a day. And he goes into the temple, and they're like begging him, no, king, you're stepping into areas you shouldn't step. And he's like, no, I'm going in here. And what happens to him? He gets leprosy, which has the net effect for the rest of his life of what? Banning him from being in the temple at all, ironically. In fact, kicked him out of the holy city completely. So it's pretty interesting that the thing that he so wanted, which was to step into the inner circles of the temple, actually got him banned from the temple completely. So he reigns the last few years of his reign, I think, as a co-regency, because having leprosy made being king incredibly inconvenient. And at that point, we have his successors begin to take over, and they're not good. And I think Isaiah is concerned about that. But what's happening here, though, is this idea of a successor king who will rule justly is constantly in the thinking of Isaiah and in the nation of Judah and in the city of Jerusalem. Where is the king who will do what is right for the people? And what happens is when you have evil kings, evil people take advantage of evil circumstances. Because when you have an evil king, it's really hard for the king to renounce corruption if they're involved in it too. And what takes place in Jerusalem and what takes place in Judah is an expansion of corrupt activities. And this puts a press on the soul of Isaiah, who's just broken over it. So some people think that what Isaiah sees here, behold, a king will reign righteously and princes will rule justly, is that the king that Isaiah has been praying for is none other than maybe King Hezekiah, who does come to power and issue a series of reforms. In fact, some of the reforms are pretty striking, that they had set up idolatrous worship in the temple, and Hezekiah drives all of that out. And in fact, strangely enough, that during the time of Hezekiah, they had taken the bronze serpent. You remember this from Numbers? They're out in the wilderness, and they're complaining about the food, and the Lord sends fiery serpents into the camp. And they're told to make the bronze serpent, and every time someone is bitten by the snake, they look to the serpent and they're healed, right? 700 years later, they've set it up as an idol to burn incense to it as a deity in the temple. And so Hezekiah had to take the thing and smash it to bits and get rid of it because the people had set it up as an idol. So, it could be that that's the king described here. However, there are other commentators who will note the fact that in Isaiah chapter 32, verse 15, it describes the pouring out of the Spirit of God in the middle of this, and in ways that does not seem to be completely fulfilled in Hezekiah's day. Thus, pointing many biblical scholars to say, This may be Hezekiah in some kind of temporary way, but the ultimate fulfillment is in the person of Jesus, the coming Messianic King. And this is true also of Isaiah chapter 7. A virgin will conceive and bear a son, and we'll call his name Emmanuel. Many people have noted that Isaiah in the very next chapter has a kid, and that maybe Isaiah's own kids are what's described here, or maybe the king has a kid, and that's the one that's described there. But a lot of biblical scholars have said there's a way in which during Isaiah's day, a virgin will conceive, a young lady will conceive and have a child, and will call his name Emmanuel as a partial or small fulfillment of that, but that the ultimate fulfillment was Mary having Jesus, that this is the ultimate fulfillment. So we see this in Isaiah, where you might have partial fulfillments and complete fulfillment. Isaiah may have looked at Hezekiah as a fulfillment, at least at some level, of this prophecy, because he does come into the world of incredible corruption, and there's a bit of hopefulness here for Isaiah, is that maybe we will be preserved, right? Others have also pointed to Josiah. King Josiah is the king after Manasseh, and King Josiah does also bring in a series of reforms. And Josiah, though, meets the untimely death on the battlefield in his battle with the Egyptians, with Pharaoh. So I think this is probably maybe partly fulfilled in Isaiah's day in Hezekiah, but I think ultimately this is a prophecy about Jesus Christ himself. Now, one of the questions with that, though, the reason NASB, I think, does not capitalize the K here, has to do with the second half of this verse. And you guys were wondering how we're 40 weeks into this and only in Isaiah 32. Because we're 20 minutes into today and we're still in verse 1. That's why. So the second half of this verse is what's led people to ask this question: who are these princes ruling with this king, if this is Jesus? You see the dilemma there. So it's led to some speculation. If it's Hezekiah, you could say, oh, it's Hezekiah and the leadership around him, and this is a prophecy about them. And this is why I think NASB was hesitant or reticent to make this K a capital K. I assume that they have decided there's enough question mark here to not, this is sarcasm, to not go capitalizing nouns unless we're German or we're sure it's Messiah. Those two restrictions. And so the guy's doing it. And since it's the new American standard, we're with option 2 here. Yeah, we're with option 2. Yes?
Instead of referring to Jesus' first coming, could it refer to his second coming, where he ruled and he had said his disciples would sit on both sides of him and rule, and they could be the princes?
This is, okay, so in reading the various speculations, this is one of the speculations, is that this is talking about Jesus, and in particular the reference is made by scholars would say the Revelation text, where the 12 apostles join in this moment, right? Where the 12 apostles are there and join in this moment. And they say this is maybe what Isaiah's seen is this moment of the apostles joining in. And I still remember this because when my son and I were reading through the book of Revelation together, he asked this question. He said, wait, John seen this? I was like, yeah. He goes, does that mean John saw himself? I'm like, all right, no more questions for you right before bedtime. Now I won't be able to sleep thinking about it. You're going to go to sleep. I'm now going to lay in bed going, what did John see? And did he recognize himself? Could he tell which one he was? And did he recognize the other guys? Oh, there's Simon Peter. Or did someone have to tell him, that's the apostles? Trust me, you're going to look a lot better years from now. You know, that kind of thing. I don't know. But we do have the 12 apostles, right, with Jesus. And that would clearly be a statement. Some others have also tried to suggest a broader thing than even the apostles and gone the way of the entire church. That you're a royal priesthood. Remember that? Simon Peter writes about the church, that you are a royal priesthood, a holy nation. And so maybe these princes are me and you, that will rule with him. We will reign with him, right? That's been some discussion. Yes, Alan.
The word princes, though, if I remember correctly, throughout the Old Testament, usually referred to angels of some sort. In the book of Daniel, especially.
Right, yeah, the prince of the particular region comes to see Daniel in Daniel chapter 9. I was held up, the prince in this region. It does at times, yes. There are direct uses of the word prince in reference to a couple of king things where a person's identified in that particular role. But yes, at times the word prince or princes are used with angelic host in mind. Daniel being the best example of that. And given that Daniel and Isaiah are fairly contemporaneous of one another, that would maybe be fitting with each other too, yeah. Good question. Maybe it's Christ and the angels. You remember the prediction in Matthew chapter 23 when Jesus says, when the Son of Man comes with all his holy angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. That would give support to what you're saying there, that these princes could be angelic beings, and they're part of that, yeah. And then you have Revelation, where each church has an angelic representative of some sort, it appears, if it's not referring to the pastor of the church. There's some debate over that. But all right, other comments or questions? Again, you poor individuals, you've been dropped into the middle. First of all, you have to deal with me again on a Sunday. And you've been dropped into the middle of the book of Isaiah. And in terms of leaving on a Sunday and feeling like any kind of progress has been made, we're still on verse 1. And so, yeah. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, which version uses a capital K? The 21st century King James does capitalize the K here. Which is interesting to me because I've actually viewed the NASB a little bit free with their capitalization at times, especially with the word spirit. So I'm a little surprised that the King James would beat out the New American Standard of all things in capitalizing, because the King James does not capitalize pronouns for divine references. The New American Standard does. Oh, the 21st century King James capitalizes pronouns. Oh, of this. Okay. I'd be curious because British tradition is not to capitalize pronouns with reference to God. This is American tradition. And if you're writing in American seminaries, you are permitted to continue to do that unless you're writing a church history PhD dissertation, in which case you're going to have a non-theologian historian be one of your readers, and you're not supposed to capitalize it then. I found this out while I was working on my thesis, and they're like, well, you can, because I capitalized he with reference to God in my THM thesis, and my reader said, that's fine, just don't do it at your PhD, because they don't like it in the church history area. In theology department, you can do it, not in the history department. I'm like, are we serious right now? Anyway, yeah. So traditionally, King James says capitalize the nouns, but not the pronouns, yeah. Really? Good for them. I'm a fan. I still do it today. I do. I still do it today. I can't help myself. If I'm typing, even free, like devotional stuff, if the he refers to Jesus, it gets the capital H. Yeah, you too. Okay, all right. Yeah, it's just built into I love it. I think it's great. Okay, well. He deserves eternal worship. He should at least get a capital letter. Just saying. All right. Okay, so the King James, the 21st century King James, that would make him in the 400s. He's like 400 years old now, the 21st century King James. Yeah. All right. Because I think he died in like 1640 or something like that. So he's really old now. All right, so behold a king. So I think this is a messianic reference. He will reign righteously and princes will rule justly. Each will be like a refuge from the wind and shelter from the storm. Now, I think what's going on here is speaking of the current ruling that's taking place. Oh, by the way, we're on verse 2. Speaking of the current calamity that has fallen upon the people of Jerusalem and Judea and Judah, is that it's like a storm, a wind, a storm, like they're just getting beaten up. And this rain will come like a refuge from all of this trouble and corruption. And I think, again, this is why Isaiah keeps coming back to this messianic king, is there's so much corruption in their world at that time that there's this desire for that kind of trouble to stop and for goodness and righteousness to reign. Now, fortunately, due to evolution in the 21st century, none of us experience really any trouble in the world today due to corruption or sin or evil. So this is really an Old Testament thing more than anything. Yeah, I think you and I also will at times experience a desire of we need refuge from the wind and the shelter and the storm, a stream of water in a dry land, which is a very common picture, right? Yeah, a very common picture in the Old Testament, right, of the streams of water in a patched land. In this case, the land is patched, though seemingly parched, seemingly because of the bad, corrupt leadership that Israel's experiencing at this time, or Judah in particular is experiencing at this time. And like the shade of a huge rock in a parched land. And so there's relief from the suffering. There's relief from the suffering that's taking place here. And that this coming king and the princes that will come with him will function as relief to the suffering that has been going on in Jerusalem and now, we've already been warned in Isaiah that there's a coming destruction and that all of the city of Jerusalem will be completely annihilated. This will come at the hands of the Babylonians. We're told explicitly in Isaiah that both Assyria and then eventually Babylon will come, great judgment against the city, and will completely destroy it. In fact, we're told that it will be a jackal's hangout. It will be like an eagle's resting place or nesting place. Not one stone will be on top of the hill. And the prediction is this will come at the hands of first the Assyrians will come and cause great calamity, but then ultimately the Babylonians will come and cause great calamity. But we're told in Isaiah that Babylonian kingdom will be brought to an end. And so, and rather quickly too, I might add, which is exactly what happens. And so the corruption of Jerusalem and the corruption of the Judean, the leaders of Judah have brought so much trouble that the people wake up every day just saying, I want shelter from this corruption all around me, from the evil that's going on all around me. And so this picture here is of a promised king who will bring this. And this is why I don't think Hezekiah completely fulfills this, because even during Hezekiah's day, there's still a lot of corruption taking place. He's trying to stamp it out, but he can't completely. And even Hezekiah himself, as you might remember, this is why I don't think this is the guy, because Hezekiah himself is the one who, when the Babylonian officials showed up, went, you know, it'd be really cool is if they wrote a big article about me back in the Babylonian times about all the gold that I've got down at this temple. Wouldn't that be cool? And shows them the whole thing. And so I don't know that he's always the wind and shelter from the storm that's predicted here. To me, it seems like he actually decided to tear down the shelter and to knock the rock over is what it looks like to me, and to reroute the stream of water is what it looks like to me. So Hezekiah does not completely fulfill this. If he does so temporarily, it is at best temporary. So, all right, comments or questions? I don't want to go too fast. We're already on verse 3. So, all right, so then the eyes of those who see will not be blinded, and the ears of those who hear will listen, and the mind of the hasty will discern the truth, and the tongue of the stammerers will hasten to speak clearly. I was thinking about this verse this week when thinking about the New Testament encounters with Jesus and the miraculous things he does. Why does Jesus restore the ability to speak to the person who is unable to speak? Answer, because sin is like the physical ailment that causes an individual not to be able to speak, and that sin ravages the in the spiritual realm, our mouth and what it says. Why does Jesus restore sight to the blind? Well, because sin ravages us in the way that blindness ravages the blind person and prevents us from being able to see spiritual truths clearly. Why does Jesus restore the lame man to be able to walk? Because in that is a proverbial picture of sin and the way it tears apart our ability to move from point A to B in any kind of righteous or good way. That sin is like the way the lame person is unable to move. Sin creates that for us. Why does Jesus raise the dead? Because sin brings spiritual death into the world. And all of these things, all of the physical challenges today, all of the ailments, all of the struggles we have are all physical pictures of the spiritual reality of the lameness, the mental capacity for sin that blinds our minds to truth, that covers our ears from hearing what is true, the silencing of the prophetic voice, all of these things. And so when Jesus opens the ears of the deaf and the eyes of the blind and the mouth to speak of those who are mute and gets the lame to rise up again and cleanses the leper, because the leprosy is like the impurity that is the spiritual condition of all people, and that Jesus cleanses that with his touch. And all of these things show us the ultimate work of Jesus in the physical realm, because it points to the spiritual and eternal reality. And that's why, again, I think this is... I think this does not seem to be something that Hezekiah has the capacity to do. Then the eyes of those who see will not be blinded, and the ears of those who hear will listen. I think, though Isaiah does probably speak some truth into the nation of Israel, I don't think he has the ability to completely fulfill this. And we're reminded of other texts in the book of Isaiah that speak of this section more prophetically future. So let me read these first few verses, and then I'm going to show you that they seem to be connected with other verses. Behold, a king will reign righteously, and princes will rule justly. Each will be like a refuge from the wind and a shelter from the storm, like streams of water in a dry country, like the shade of a huge rock in a parched land. Then the eyes of those who see will not be blind, and the ears of those who hear will listen. The mind of the hasty will discern the truth, and the tongue of stammerers will hasten to speak clearly. Now this is some of the other words of Isaiah. For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace, and on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and hold it with justice and righteousness from then on forevermore. In Isaiah 11, then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. Remember, we see this, verse 15 of Isaiah 32. The Spirit will be poured out in those days. The Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and strength, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And so I mentioned to you about the miracles of Jesus in the New Testament. In many ways, to me, seem to be a picture, a parabolic picture. I think they happened. I don't want to use the word parable and then you think I'm not speaking historically. I do think Jesus brought Lazarus back from the dead, and the widow at Nain's son back from the dead, and so forth and so on. I think those are true. I think he turned water to wine. I think those are true. I think he walked on water and fed 5,000. But I do think they also function parabolically. They function as a parable, meaning they point to some greater reality. What's greater than the spiritual blindness of the man born blind in John 9, or the physical blindness of the man born blind in John 9, is the spiritual blindness for us all. And that's why Jesus says in that text, I am the light of the world. The greater need that man had was not the need for physical sight, though I imagine as dominating as that particular physical need would be for him every day of his life, literally every day. He was born blind. As great as that need might be, Jesus restoring sight to him pointed to the fact that that's a minor thing compared to spiritual blindness and the eternal need for spiritual sight. And so all of these things in Isaiah, I think, are driving towards this need for a coming messianic figure who will do what none of the earthly kings are able to do. including Hezekiah and Josiah and so forth. All right. Well, as always, we kind of run out of time. After this, there's a couple of verses on the judgment on these noblemen, and they're really just fools, and these rogue, rebellious people. There's a judgment on the women at that time period. They're following along with all of this. But then we get verse 15, until the Spirit is poured out upon us from on high, and the wilderness becomes a fertile field, and the fertile field is considered as a forest. So there's this promise of the coming pouring out of the Holy Spirit, and we would think of verses like Acts chapter 2, where the Spirit is poured out. This is also a quote from the book of Joel, where Joel is told prophetically that the Spirit of the Lord will be poured out in the last days. And Simon Peter refers to this in Acts chapter 2 in his sermon at the day of Pentecost. All right, well, we're out of time. And now you have a new gratitude for not having to be in here. Yeah. So this does note the spiritual excellence of those who walk through suffering week after week after week. So, yeah, just imagine the crown and the thorn in the jewel in their crowns that they earn week after week from the Isaiah study. All right. Well, I hope you guys have a great day. If you're staying for service, we have the Lord's Supper today. And then I hope all of you will join us tonight for the missions dinner fellowship. And it should be the food will be good, the fellowship will be good. We'll hear from Caleb during part of it. And so my desire, hope would be all of you be able to join with us tonight. And if you haven't done so, the silent auction's in there. And so you can bid on stuff. We'll also have cash and carry set up tonight. And so, if all the monies will go toward the helping of Caleb in Myanmar, the children's home and the church there on that property. And so anything you bid on and win, if you spend $50 on a really nice cake or something like that, all $50, the person's donated their time and energy and the resources to make it. All those proceeds will go to Caleb and the children's home. I actually made 2 36-count peanut butter cookies back there with the containers included. And Kim tested it and verified. She actually said, "These are terrible, you should leave them here," were her words, which I think she was kidding. I think it was a compliment, but now that I think about it, maybe I should have withheld them for the safety of who might bid on them. But anyway, so there's 3 dozen sets of cookies, of peanut butter cookies, but each staff member has made a dessert like that or something like that. So anyway, so bid on some things, and all the proceeds will again go to Caleb and the children's home and the church that's on that property there to help them with their ministry. All right? All right, well, let's pray together. God, you're good and kind. Thank you for your mercy and your love and your grace. Thank you for the righteous King, Christ Jesus, who reigns now and will reign forever, and we will be with him forever. Lord, our hope is on that day, fixed on that day. But our hope today is fixed on the fact that you have already poured out your Spirit upon us. You have given us of your Spirit. You have brought us into relationship with you. So today, as we prepare for a time of celebration of the Lord's table, and tonight of feasting together as a church family, and this week of times of Thanksgiving together as individual families, I pray, God, you would be honored and